Hi there, welcome to our Gradient 101 webinar series. It's great to see you today. I'm joining you from California and my colleague Kate is on with us, joining us from Canvas. There she is. She'll be manning the chat for us today and I'll be your webinar facilitator. To access this webinar, please use the bit.ly link that you see in the bottom left corner of your screen. We'll go ahead and record this session. So if any of your colleagues miss it and you want to pass it on, or you just want to watch it again in slow-mo, you can. My name's Katie Selstrom. I'm the Director of Customer Experience, and Kate is on with us as well as our Customer Success Coach Extraordinaire. We also have two other team members, Donna and Busy, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. They are the ones manning our support calls and tickets, and so I'm sure you get help from them often. To jump into our session today, we're going to go ahead and launch into the topic of standards or competency-based grading. This session is really going to help you think about how to add standards and skills to your rubric or points-based assessments. If you're new to GradeCam's rubric scoring or points-based question types, or you just want to learn a little bit more about performance-based assessment, Kate did a great session just a couple weeks ago. The link is here, as well as the slides from that presentation. So if this feels like it's a little too advanced and it's not what you need right now, feel free to jump into that as a supplement to get what you need. So to jump past what she worked on last time, here is our format for today. So we're going to cover the standards-based and competency-based grading within GradeCam. We're going to walk through some step-by-step directions for how you can go about doing this with current assignments that you already have or a new one you'd like to create. I'll offer some pro tips about things to think about when you're setting up your assignment or you're reviewing your reports after you've given an assignment. And then I'll give you some extra credit work that you can do if you want to push on further. So to jump right in, we're going to start off with these slides and links, and then I'll jump into GradeCam to show this to you live. So when you start trying to create a rubrics or points-based assignment and you want to add standards, in order to do that, you're going to have to be able to edit your questions. So there's a link here to remind you about how to go about editing questions in an assignment or as you go if you're just creating it from the first time. There's also some links here for rubrics versus points-based grading, and you have the option of just using a rubric. Most of us are familiar with rubrics that grade on a 0 to 5 scale or 0 to 3, kind of like this one that you see here. Or you could use points. So you can see in this one, we have points going across the top instead of those 1, 2, 3, and 4 rubrics. So either way, you can do both of those in GradeCam, and there's some links there on the screen for you. And then side by side with standards and competency-based grading, you're really going to want to take advantage of our performance bands. Typically, we grade our assignments on a scale that's looking at percents, and we want to convert the way our tests are scored for data analysis and for feedback to students to match the rubric that we're using. So whether that's a 4, 3, 2, 1 rubric or the points that I mentioned earlier, you're going to want to adjust your performance bands for that. So we'll kind of talk through that. Another area that we'll come back to are these pro tips. So let me jump into the system and then we can come back to the pro tips in just a moment. So jumping into GradeCam, I'm on my View Assignments tab. And here I have just a few examples to walk through to kind of really solidify that edit questions section that I was mentioning to add standards, and then those points versus rubric type questions. So if I'm creating a writing rubric for the first time, let me jump into the writing rubric example that I have here. And let me go to my key. So this writing rubric that I have set up matches the writing rubric that I'm showing you here. So I have a writing rubric that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 categories. So these are the elements of my rubric, and these are the point values that I'm using across the top. And again, I could use points or I could use a straight rubric. So this could be a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4. In my example, in order to change anything about these questions, I have to edit the question. So to do that, I'm going to check the box and choose edit. If you've used a generic multiple choice assignment type, you'd see a multiple choice question here, and edit is the same process you'd follow to change that question type. So the question type I'm using is the rubric and points question type. From here, I can choose to use a rubric scale. And in that case, I would see in this area a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 as bubbles in my rubric. Or as you can see in this example, I'm using this idea of assigning points so that I can assign up to 20 points for the question and just type that in for my students. When I'm thinking about standards or competency-based grading, I'd also want to be able to add a standard. So you can see in this question, I've already added those. If you're wondering how I got those, you would just simply click your Add Standard button here and choose from any of the standard banks that you have access to. So I can search my standard banks by a subject, by a grade level. If I'm looking at a particular bank of standards, I can look for my subject area that I teach, or if it's an ACT practice test that I'm taking, I can look through that. Or if I'm looking at advanced placement courses that I teach and I want to see those standards, there's a lot of different options. So just check out what you have available in your account. And once you've selected the banks that you want to look for, you can use a search or just simply select from what you see down below, and that will add that standard to your test. If you are a frequent standards user, when you're using your standards, if there's one that you use a lot, you can favorite it, and that will just mark it in this other category here of favorites. And that way you don't have to go through the process of finding the bank and searching for it each time. You can just come right to your favorite standards and check off the ones that you use most frequently. That's just a little pro tip there for workflow. So after I've created my rubric-based question here, I decided to use points. If I wanted to use that rubric scale again, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, I can do that. Even change the rubric options that are showing with the bubbles that will be available. Then I'm ready to go and print my form. To print a form, you go to your forms area, and you have a couple different options here. So for this example that I'm giving, my students are actually going to be taking this essay question on a piece of paper or online in a Google Doc, and I'm not going to be scanning that to live in GradeCam. All I'm going to keep in GradeCam is the actual scoring. So for that use case example, my questions didn't have to have lines or an area for students to write. I'm simply using the form side by side with looking at the students writing either live on paper or online in a Google Doc, and I'm scoring one student at a time. So I can do that by printing the forms for my classes. So picking a class here, I get pre-filled forms now for all of my students. And let's see, just to make that a little bit bigger, I'll be able to have my students already have their IDs filled in. I'm not going to be doing that. And I can just be typing in or writing in this case, the students' points as I go, one assignment at a time. If I want to make my life a little easier, instead of having these points here, if I'm using a rubric scale of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, these could just be bubbles and I could be bubbling those in. That's another option as well. So just some ideas around how you can use that writing rubric form for standards or competency-based grading if you're doing these full essays. Many of us don't actually give a whole essay though in this format. We reserve that for our English and history, social science teachers, but I may be asking those short questions within an assignment that already has other question types. So let me show you an example real quick of that. Here's a quiz that I have. It's just a quick practice quiz with some multiple choice questions. And then there's a question here that I want students to type a response for. For this type of question, let me go ahead and edit. I actually chose an open response capture question. So instead of rubric and points where students are writing somewhere else, or I'm going to be looking and scoring separately, I actually want to capture students writing right within GradeCam. So I'm going to use that open response capture to do that either online or on paper. And then from here, I can decide the rubric scale I want to use or the points, just like I did before, and capture the student's response. I even gave a little header to remind the student right on their form what I'd like them to do. I could even give a point value if I wanted, so they know how much this particular question is weighted on the test. And I can even change the value of this question on the test by using this little multiplier here. So those are all options that you have to kind of finagle the overall test score the way you want it. Down below again, I've added those standards so I can either choose from the bank that I have, my favorites, or here you can see it's already been added. And this looks a little bit different when I'm grading it or printing out the forms. Let me show you that part. This time I have an area for students to write. And then I get to, when I'm reviewing the writing that students have given me, either online or paper, I get to input that score digitally. So let me show you how that looks. Let me get onto the responses page here. Okay, so let's pretend we've used rubrics or points or open capture. We either have responses on paper or they've submitted them online. I have this by question option where I can jump right into one of those rubric or points-based questions. And here right on the screen, I can grade student by student, either what they've typed on for online access or what they've written and we've scanned with our document cameras, our device cameras, or our phones, and just really quickly score on that rubric that I have available to me. When I'm all finished, the benefit of using those standards linked to how students are doing is I can view reports with that standard analysis available to me. So I have the option here to look at standards in an overview format. This is just all the standards that were on that particular test. But if I want to see student by student, how students performed on standards, I can see every student in my class or all my classes with how they performed on standards. Or if it means more for me to look at the question and the standards together, I have that configure option on my question by question report that allows me to show standards in the header. I have that toggled on so that I can see question by question exactly what skills we're working on. Here you can see, I get to see right away for that writing question, the rubric scoring for the question. There is another configuration option that if I want to see how students were awarded points for each of these questions, I can do that simply by toggling this on. Doesn't change too much of what we saw with the rubric, but it does change the scores and what I see for the other multiple choice and other question types. So it's just another quick tip that you can use. And then one other key part is this lowest standards option. So I can see if I've added those standards or competencies, what the lowest performing standards are for a particular class list. I can see it by class as well. And then if I'm in my PLC, I have that option of analyzing standards for all of the teachers in my PLC that gave that same assignment, if we've decided to share our assignments together in that way. So lots of great tips. It looks like we have something in the chat. Oh, that's Kate keeping on top of everybody getting access to their presentation. That's great. Kate, before I move on to the next section to tell a little bit about performance bands, was there anything I missed?
No, I think you covered it real well.
Okay, great. I'm going to keep cruising, and if anybody on the webinar has any questions, you can pop them into the chat. So I did jump into our reports, and you were really quickly able to see the distribution of scores for how students did. And that works great for this mixed assignment that has multiple choice questions and rubric questions, because I'm grading it on a percentage scale, the typical grading scale that I would use. But sometimes when I'm giving an essay, for the example of grading on a 3-point rubric scale, if I want to know which students are scoring as proficient or developing or beginning, I might want to look at my reports in a little bit different way and apply a different performance band. So here in the reporting section within an assignment, I have the option to use different performance bands, and I'd highly recommend creating performance bands for rubrics based on the number of points or based on the way that you're grading. So in this particular writing rubric, I have a 3-point rubric. So students on their entire essay can either get a 3, a 2, or a 1. So I'm going to need to create my grading scale to use those cut points. I want to know if students are in that general 3 range. So down here you can see 2.8 to 3, a 2.5 to 2.7, or anything less than a 2.5. And you can make those cut points as generous or as restrictive as you want. But here I'm able to look at students' performance based on how they're doing on a rubric, not just on an arbitrary 100-point scale for percents. So just a quick tip there. And if you're not sure how to create performance bands, or you're not seeing a whole list like I have, make sure you visit your account profile and you go to your settings. And this is where you can go to create your own performance bands. So you have a performance bands option. There's even a little badge here to give you more tips and tricks for how to use performance bands. And you can edit or create for the first time any type of performance band that you'd like. Or if you don't have access to create lots and lots of performance bands, your GradeCam admin has the ability to create uniform or common rubric performance bands for you. So you can see my GradeCam admin has created quite a few for different teams, different PLCs, even at different schools. So you have a lot of options there for the performance bands that you can make. If I click on one, I'm able to label the performance bands differently, giving an abbreviation of some kind and determining the point values as well as the colors. So you would definitely want these performance bands to match the way that you grade with standards-based or competency-based grading. That way you have, it's not apples and oranges that you're comparing when you're looking at performance. And it also lets you transfer everything to your grade book using that same scale and this performance band. So if I decided to transfer these scores into my grade book, I'm now able to pick the class. And instead of using exact points awarded, I now can use that performance band abbreviation. And I'm going to get, in my case, the performance band abbreviation of beginning and proficient to transfer. But I just as easily could change those performance bands. And instead of them saying beginning and proficient, it could be a 4, a 3, a 2, and a 1. So easy tips there just to make things easier. Okay, cruising right along. Pro tips, what this looks like for students and what it can look like for them on paper or online. I showed you some of the examples for what the keys can look like as forms. If I'm grading on one of those rubric scales, when I generate a form, I get to see those question labels and the rubric scores. More likely, this would be what I am seeing as a teacher. I'm looking at students and I'm doing the grading here. I can be doing that online or on paper, just depending on my own preferences. If I was wondering about what students see, I could also give this as an online assignment. And in Portal, most likely for this assignment, I would just have them type in a free open space, and that all those rubrics would just be showing for me. So this is actually not a great example. Let me find the one that has that open response part. Here we go. So for students taking an open response capture question, they're just going to see a response area like this. So this is an open response question that's been set up for me to rubric score. The students aren't seeing the rubric, they're just seeing the area where they're supposed to type. So that's the benefit of that open response capture question type, is students get to write right on their form or type directly online to give a response. If I'm choosing the rubrics or points-based question, I'm likely not capturing the students' responses on paper, although there are ways to do it. You typically are doing that grading right within GradeCam. Okay, let's see anything else. Open response grading, I've already showed you, so that's easy peasy. Extra credit. Kate did a really good job a couple of weeks ago of showing observational assignments. So if you're looking to just make a class list and rubric grade or competency grade or standards-based grade a whole class at once, there's a lot of inspiration here, different types of observational forms you might use for a class discussion, for class activities and checking in homework, for a science project, a capstone project, an art project, or if you're an elementary teacher, you might be observing particular skills and wanting to grade those with a rubric for your competency or standards-based grading. So if you're looking to do that for a whole class at once, not one student at a time like I'm showing you today, definitely take a look at those extra credit resources. There's some additional tips here about some other performance-based assessments. There's a quick video that you can watch, and then a dig into what the data looks like after you've given one of these assessments, because there's a couple different ways to set things up so that you can see the data that you need to see. Check out our links to personal standards, performance bands, and gradebook transfer. That's all there for you. You have this ability to even upload your own personal standards if the standard banks that we have aren't working for you. or you just want them to be a little bit more personalized, take a look at that resource. That might help you out. And as always, if you have questions, make sure you visit our support site or give us a call. Our support team is always available to help, and they usually have some great creative suggestions about what you can do next. I'm going to check in with Keat. Keat, was there anything else that folks mentioned in the chat?
No, I think we're all good to go. You provided a lot of great resources around that standards-based and competencies-based grading. So really expanding the capabilities of what you can do with your assessments.
Great. Well, thanks so much. I'll stop the recording and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for joining us for our Gradient 101 session. Bye-bye.